cause of mobile voting and just voting technology in general. What does it mean for that cause as a whole?
Yeah. So we got introduced to a few very interesting people around that time. So we met the West Virginia Secretary of State, Mac Warner, who had been newly elected as a former military officer. We met him so every year in January, there's this organization called the National Association of Secretaries of State. So as you know, in the US, elections are run by the states. The federal government doesn't run elections. So in every state, it's usually the Secretary of State's office or the state election director. And in a few states, they have a state election board as well. But those are kind of the key decision makers. So at this conference in January, we met Mac Warner and his team for the first time. We had also been introduced to a philanthropic organization called Tusk Philanthropies, led by Bradley Tusk and Sheila Nix. And so all of us met there in DC, had kind of a meeting of the minds. Secretary Warner and his team, they looked at our product. We also had some election experts there from a company called Clear Ballot, BlockChain advocates from New America. They have this blockchain trust accelerator. So it was a very interesting group of people all came together. And I think what was really a key thing was the problem that was trying to be solved, because you can go look for you can have a product in search for a solution, right? Or you can have a solution for which you build a problem for which you build a solution. So here the problem, which was very clearly articulated by Secretary Warner, given his military experience, he had served in Iraq, served in Afghanistan, and it was U.S. military personnel overseas don't have the same level of access to voting as a citizen in the country might. They don't have easy access to mail. There's no location to go vote in. Mail often gets delayed. And so that was the problem he was trying to solve, and our solution was kind of a really good fit for that. So that was kind of the origin. And then things moved quickly. Obviously, there was due diligence happening from the state side, from other parties as well. And everything came together literally, I would say, 3 weeks before the elections. So before the midterms at the end of the year, there is the primaries. So the primaries were supposed to begin in March because military voters get access 45 days prior to election day, which is in May. And so literally 3 weeks prior, we got the green light, and we then started getting all the integrations and access to the ballot styles and everything. So those 3 weeks were very, very intense and stressful. And we had 2 county clerks in West Virginia who were kind of the initial pioneers, and they were very closely working with us. And it all went down right to the wire. I remember on the day on which ballots are supposed to go out, we got everything ready literally like minutes before the deadline. So it was a very intense, but that's the kind of experience you entrepreneurs, and kind of dreamers, you kind of wait for. And so that was, I'd say, one of the most satisfying experiences for us as a very small team. We were like 7 people at that moment. How we were able to pull together, a project of that magnitude, such a short notice, and do it in a right way, even though people always criticize anything you do. But yeah, we were very proud of that.
So obviously that was sort of the turning point for Voatz. And then you mentioned Denver and Utah County. By now, do you think that Voatz has gone through enough learning and experience to be able to take on projects at a greater scale or even projects sort of simultaneously? And what were the main learnings that came out of those two engagements as well?
Yeah, I think Denver was so West Virginia, both the primary and then the general election in the midterm in 2018 was kind of, I would say, really two first baby steps. Denver in 2019 took it another notch, where what we introduced first with Denver was the ability for voters to audit their vote for the first time. So using the blockchain, using voter receipts and paper ballot images, because as a lot of times it kind of gets skipped from the narrative, but in our system, even though you're voting on the phone, on your smartphone or tablet, it actually ends up producing a paper ballot at the jurisdiction, and it's the paper ballot that's tabulated, and everything's audited and checked using receipts and the data on the blockchain. So it kind of links to the legacy system, but also brings all the new technologies together. And so Denver pioneered that with us, and I think that was a kind of the next game changer, because using that kind of the stepping stone to be able to trust a completely digital system. And you mentioned the idea of how do you build trust amongst people who may not understand the technology. That was exactly the goal there. Like, how can we make this simple enough that a normal citizen who may not be a math expert, who may not be a computer science expert, they should be able to see, oh, this actually works, and I can trust this. And so that was I'd say that was the really interesting thing that happened in 2019, and since then we've continued to do that in all our elections since. And the other thing that has evolved is we initially started with military voters and citizens overseas, and then we realized there's another demographic which is very disadvantaged with the traditional process, and that's voters with disabilities. So people who can't mark a paper ballot, or for whom, touching a screen and they have motor challenges, or, other disabilities. And the smartphones these days, both the iPhones and Android devices, have excellent accessibility features. So if you're a disabled voter, if you're blind, if you have motor disabilities, you can use all the new technology to, you can use Braille keyboards, you can speak out the ballot, you can even, speak out the write-in. And so we incorporated that as in Utah County started deploying that in 2019. And then they pioneered that in the presidential election last year as well. So gradually kind of, building the blocks, helping voters who need the most help. That's kind of been our focus. And now we've reached a stage where we feel really good that the building blocks are all there. They are, safe enough from a security perspective. They're accessible for voters who really need the help. And the system now is ready to scale, which is, I think, the question you were asking. Can it serve, can it do thousands of elections at the same time? Can it serve, millions of people? And the answer would be yes. And we had a taste of that. Coincidentally, at the end of the presidential election season last year in December, we did a national referendum in South America, in Venezuela. So you might know Venezuela has two governments, so to speak. There's the Maduro government, which is largely being kind of de-recognized by most of the world. And then there's the Juan Guaido government. So they organized a popular referendum, and we had almost 6 million people who participated. Around 4 million voted in person around the world, and then about 2 million voted digitally. And about 1.8 million of those touched our platform, both using the smartphone apps, tablet apps, and then also we had partnered with Telegram company, which was building a Telegram bot. And so that gave us the confidence that not only can we serve a much larger group of voters at the same time, but also, go up against nation state threat actors and, people who would, come after us as system becomes more and more widely used. And so we came out pretty good on both of those fronts. So yeah, we feel really good. Obviously, the work never ends, and there's always things to improve and make them better. But as a baseline, the technology is ready. Yeah.
So to your point about the system generating paper ballots in the jurisdiction as a way of building confidence for users, do you think that more work would need to be done on that note of public confidence in terms of features, or do you think that this paper ballot mixed with the technology is sufficient to sort of stem a reasonable voters' concerns about security?
I think technology. So one thing to keep in mind is the paper ballot, along with the voter receipt and the ability to audit the vote. I think that's key. And so, stepping back a little bit, so when you vote on the smartphone app, you get an instant receipt. It's an encrypted, password protected receipt, shows you the ovals you've marked. And then once you get access to the audit system, so every receipt has an anonymous ID on it. You as a voter can go into the audit system, use your anonymous ID, and see the equivalent copy of the anonymous receipt with the jurisdiction receipt, because they also receive a copy of your receipt, but anonymously. And then you get to see an image of the paper ballot that was printed for your vote and tabulated and then kind of rescanned back so you can see the image. And then there's the data on the blockchain. And so when you as a voter, you look at your receipt, you look at, okay, that was my paper ballot, everything's matching, right? You get the trust, like, this is it. My vote made it in time, it was counted in time. And that's kind of the confidence I'm looking for as a voter. In addition, even if you didn't vote in that jurisdiction, in that election, you as a citizen now can independently audit an election. So you could get access to the audit system. You could look at all the anonymous IDs which represent the voters, anonymous voters who participated, look at their receipts, look at the corresponding paper ballots, look at the data on the blockchain. And so you can independently audit an election on your own or a subset of it. And so I think that combination, getting citizens involved and making it simple that every citizen doesn't have to be a math expert or a crypto expert to figure this out. It has to be very visual and easy to understand. I think that's the key. And everything is in place now. What's not in place is the education. So now we need to educate this on a wider scale. The elections we've done, we've educated the people, we've educated the election officials and the auditors. And now I think the next kind of step is, how do you educate a wider audience around the country, around the world, that there is a receipt and then there is an image of the paper ballot that's printed that you can use to verify. And so that, I think that is the key. That's the game changer, because when we vote traditionally in person, we don't have that mechanism available. And so it's one of the reasons why so much mistrust has been created, because it's easy to, doubt something that you can't see. But if we flip it on its head, give everybody a receipt and show them the paper ballot that was generated and tabulated for them, then you can then systematically remove that doubt and uncertainty that something bad happened. And so I think that is the key to rebuilding the trust as we go forward.
So for the academics and technologists out there that say internet-based voting cannot, at this stage in technology, cannot possibly be secure enough to facilitate mobile voting, what do you say, or why do you disagree with that criticism?
They've had that viewpoint for the better part of 2 decades now. And the arguments they provide are somewhat outdated. Like, so much has changed in the last few years, starting with smartphones. I mean, your smartphone is now orders of magnitude more secure than your computer, right? Most people don't realize that. your smartphone is actually